So, Brent, it's interesting when you look at this. Like, we talk about the armor of God, like physical armor, but really any battle with the enemy is a spiritual battle, and the battles fought between good and evil are fought often within the heart of a person.
That's a good point. You know, think about when the devil uses like strongholds that are in our life, like fear, jealousy, pride, things like that. Those are all things that happen within our heart.
Yeah, and you think about it, the devil is really trying to snatch us away from our loving relationship with God, but we as believers can and actually should play an active role in this spiritual battle.
Yeah, I like Ecclesiastes 9:18. It says, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." So many Christians, I think, become casualties of war because they're trying to fight Satan and fight evil with their might or their force rather than using godly wisdom that we've been given.
Okay, so I definitely want to talk about that, how we as believers should respond in the spiritual battle. But first, can we talk a bit more about Satan and his domain?
Sure, when we talk about his domain, we need to realize that Satan has been defeated, but he's not dead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but he and his allies are being held in bondage. I have a verse for you. It says, "God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment."
Oh, so they are actually being kept in bondage.
Yeah, so how do we battle against the devil?
Well, we know from the Bible we're supposed to submit to God, resist the acts of the devil, and like it says in James 4:6 and 7, "Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you."
So the war against the enemy begins with unconditional submission to God. Would you say the best way to stand our ground against the devil is to be virtuous?
Yeah, and the Bible encourages us to be good and walk uprightly before the Lord. That's another thing it says. And so when we do that, we're able to resist the devil and his attacks.
Yeah, the Bible clearly says that the battle is a spiritual one and not of the flesh. And actually, what's that verse? It talks about how we demolish arguments and take captive every thought.
I think that's 2 Corinthians 10, verses 4 to 6.
You should read it. It's a good one.
10, 4 to 6. "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete."
So God himself has provided us with all the armor and the weapons necessary to defeat the strongholds of the enemy.
That's right. So we have these vast resources at our disposal. So we need to be ready with all these resources to withstand the attacks of the enemy.
So what you're talking about, it sounds like we're not supposed to take a passive stance at all, but we should actually be active in this battle.
That's right. Can you read Ephesians 6:13 to 18?
You know I can read, dear.
Will you read Ephesians 6:13 to 18?
"Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints."
Okay, so you read the armor of God, and that's what we're looking at right here. So we have this armor of God. We need to be proactive. We need to be ready to fight with God's help to resist the attacks of the devil. And this armor is going to help us do it.
So we know we have these weapons, but we need to also remember that God has commanded us to be alert.
What do you think the best way to do this is?
Well, if we're faithful in prayer, that would probably be the first thing.
Yeah, we need to be faithful in prayer and to share the gospel with others all the time.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
Okay, so how can we use prayer in the battle against the devil?
And since the devil tries to stop us from sharing the gospel, how do we overcome him in that?
Well, since Satan's mission is to turn people away from God, it's our mission to try to turn them back towards God. So God's given us the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and prayer. We must pray to protect ourselves and also pray for the souls of others.
Okay, so as those who have been saved, it makes sense that we would share the message with people who aren't saved so that they can be saved just as we're saved, because we've already been saved, but we want them to be saved.
Okay, maybe you're making it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. So let's talk about how we can fight the good fight today. So remember, our battle isn't against flesh. It's actually against the devil and the powers and the principalities of the world. So therefore, we should have the mind of Christ. Can you read 1 Corinthians 2:11? So 11, 12, and 16.
Okay, and once again, dear, you know I can read.
I know you can read.
For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, the thoughts of God no one knows except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might know the things freely given to us by God. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he should instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ.
That's right. So as believers, we've been filled with the Spirit of God. We have the mind of Christ, and therefore we can know what God's will is. So we should never let the spirit of the world or the flesh take over, but let our lives be controlled by the Spirit all the time.
And when we live our lives controlled by the Spirit, that's when we live victoriously.
Yeah, but as we discussed before, we need to be living our lives with the armor of God on, so we're always ready to resist the devil.
Let me summarize.
Okay.
In our battle against the devil and the principalities of this world, we have to take a proactive stance. We cannot be passive. The war against the enemy begins with an unconditional submission to God. Resisting the devil involves walking uprightly before the Lord and obeying his commands. Since our war is a spiritual war, God gives us the weapons for our fight. We have the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the sandals of readiness, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, to help us defend against the devil's attacks. What are you doing?
On guard! I'm here to fight.
I'll fight. Oh, ah. Okay. Well, we're done.
Oh.